Assalamu alaikum. Today we are going to study about exceptions. So, firstly, we will look at types of error that can arise in our code. We will look at especially the runtime error and how we can handle runtime errors using exceptions. How do we write exceptions? How exceptions are handled? We will also look at different types of exceptions and multiple exceptions in our next video. So, the types of error. The first type of error that is very common are compile time errors or syntax error. So as we know that every language has some syntax. For example, the English language. The English language has a syntax that, for example, when we write a sentence, it has to have a subject, verb, then object. For example, I drink water. So we have a subject, verb, object. Similarly, the Python programming language also has some specific syntax. For example, for an if statement, we have to write the if keyword, then we write the condition inside it, and then we have a colon. So if we run this code, let's say, for example, I have a named a equals, let's say, 3, and if a less than 11, let me say print a. So there seems to be nothing wrong with this code. If I run this, I have output 3. Now what if I forget to write this colon here? So my the general syntax is I have to write the if statement, then the conditional statement, and then the colon. So if I do not put the colon here, it will give us an error. So what does it say? Invalid syntax, and it gives us a syntax error. So this is one of the common types of error that we have already faced. Syntax error, invalid syntax. Another type of error we can face in our code are logical errors. For example, if you look at this, I equals to 5. If I mod 2 not equal to 0, I am saying that it's even. If I mod 2 not equals to 0, if a number mod 2 is not equals to 0, the number is supposed to be an odd number, but I am saying that it is an even number. So the syntax is correct. The syntax is correct, but this is a logically wrong. So for example, if I say that the cow flies in the sky. So the sentence structure is all right. I have a subject, verb, and object. But my brain has difficulty to process this, and that how can a cow fly in the sky? So no, that is incorrect. So that is not realistic or not possible. So there is some logical error here. So similarly, I'm saying that I mod 2 not equal to 0, meaning that the number should be an odd number, but I'm saying that an even number. So if I show this as an example, so let's say num equals, I have a number, let's say 10, and I'm saying that if num mod 2 equal 0. So if num mod 2 equal 0, I want to print that the number is an even number. But let's say if I write odd here. Now what happens if I run this? If I run this, it's saying that the number that is 10 is an odd number. So syntactically, the syntax of my code here is correct, but the logic is wrong. This is a logical error. So then moving on, runtime error. This is the most common, most important type of error that we will study, and we usually handle runtime errors using exceptions. So moving forward, runtime error. What is runtime error and how that can arise? So runtime errors arise when we run the code. So for example, I'm declaring a variable named a which has 5, variable named b which has 0. Now I'm trying to perform a calculation a by b, 5 by 0. So can we divide any number by 0? No, that gives us error. So we are trying to divide by 0. So division by 0 gives an error named 0 division error. If I show you this here, so let's say a equals 33. Let's write correct statements here. So b equals, let's say 11, and I'm trying to show here, see, let's say C equals A by B. Then we would like to print C. If we do this, everything is correct here, everything is all right. So if I run this, what happens? I have 3.0. So A is 33, B is 11, 33 by 11 gives us 3.0. So 3.0 is stored in C, we are printing 3.0 here. What if B is 0? Then what happens? I'm trying to attempt a division by 0, which will give us an error in Python. So if I run this, it gives us a very big error here. So it says it's 0 division error, and it says in which line there is traceback, and in which line the error occurred. Here it says in the third line, C equals to A by B, the error is in here, and the name of the error is 0 division error. We are trying to, the message that is being given here is division by 0. So a 0 division error is occurring here. So we will, exception handles this type of an error so that my program is not terminated. So if I look at this, so exception occurs during the execution when I'm trying to execute a program, and the normal flow of instructions is being executed. So print C, the print C command is not being executed anymore. 33 by 0 is not occurring. So if I write here for better visibility, if I write, let's say, end, so my code ends here. So I'm signifying this by writing end here. Now if everything was all right, we would have seen that C would be printed, that is 3.0, and end would be printed. Sorry. So if I run this, 3.0 and end is being printed. Now if I try to attempt a division by 0, now if I run this, I have 0 division error, and my program is terminating. So this end is not being printed. So C, the value of C has not been calculated. 33 by 0 is not possible. So this was not possible in any case. But the last statement, print end, this statement is also not executing. So my program terminates. So exception handles this type of an error so that the program terminates in a way that we want to, or if we want, we can continue the program in a way that we want to by handling exceptions, so that my program does not disrupt or terminate abruptly. So let's look at some of these examples. How is an exception written? So we usually write exceptions inside try except blocks. So we handle exceptions in Python using try except blocks. In Java, we used to write try catch blocks. So this syntax varies in other programming languages. So in Python, we use the try except block. So let's look at what is happening here. So similarly, A equals to something, we have declared a variable A, we have declared a variable B. Now we write a try block, we write try then colon. Inside the try block, we write the problematic statements. Inside the try block, we write the problematic statements. Sorry about that. So inside the try blocks, we are writing the problematic statement, the statement that can cause error. So x equals to A by B. This statement was causing error when B was 0. So we write this inside the try block, we write the printing statement inside the try block, and except exception cannot divide by 0. So we are saying that we are handling the exception here, and we are printing a statement cannot divide by 0. So and in here, if everything was all right, so I'm giving A is 6 and B is not 0, B equals to 2. So A by B is being executed very nicely. Sorry. So A by B, 6 by 2 is 3.0, so 3.0 is being printed here, and the except block is not being executed because there is no exception here. So let's try both of these out. Let's say, so I'm trying, we will write the problematic statement inside the try block. So if I write a try block here, and if we write these things inside the try block, let's say I have an exception, except exception. So I'm handling the exception that can come here, except exception. So if there is an exception, I am saying that cannot divide by 0. I'm printing the statement. Cannot divide by 0. So if everything is all right, a equals to 33, b equals to 11. So if I run this, I get my desired output. So a equals to 33. 33 by 11 is 3.0. So 3.0 is printed as output here. So I get 3.0 and there is no exception. So the except block, this statement is not being printed. If b was 0, what happens is, so a equals to 33, b equals to 0, then we go into the try block, and here is the exception that occurs. A equals to 33 and b equals to 0. So we are trying to divide 33 by 0, which is not possible, which gives us an error. What kind of error? Zero division error. So the zero division error is being caught inside exception. So this is an exception, the zero division error. So whenever an error occurs, if you write the try except block, the except block catches the error as an exception here, and it prints the desired statement that we want. So here our exception is divide by 0. So we will say cannot divide by 0. So if I run this, now we have a very nice statement, cannot divide by 0. Previously, it was showing zero division error and a lot of things after that, but now we have a nice printing statement. It says that cannot divide by 0. So this is a nice way to show things. Now if we moving on, if we look at another example here, this is a same type of exception that is occurring, except that we are writing two other statements, start procedure, end procedure, except exception. So if we try this out, let's see what happens. I'm saying that print start. And so when the exception occurs, the rest of the statement is not being executed. So when I run this, cannot divide by 0 is being printed, but print C statement is not being executed, like I showed before. So when I wrote print end, so it doesn't matter whether I write this here or here. So let me say I wrote this here. Let's say I wrote this here. So start of my code, end of my code. So if I run this, so using the correct way in the A and B has the correct value. So if I run this, there is no exception here. So we print start, my code has started. C equals to 33 by 11, I get 3.0. When I print C, I get 3.0, and I print end when my code has finished. But when an exception occurs, the next lines should not be executed. So let's see what happens. If I run this, so start, I go inside the try block, I print start, I try to execute this statement A by B. So I try to execute this statement A by B. So A is 33, B equals to 0. I cannot divide by 0. This gives us an exception, zero division error. So the exception is caught here, and this statement is printed. So I am printing the statement cannot divide by 0, and the next two lines where I am printing C or I am printing N are not being executed. So when an exception occurs, the next lines are not executed. How can we handle this? Well, what if we want to print end no matter what? So we want to print end whether when the code ends, whether by exception or not. For this, we can use the finally keyword. So the finally keyword, basically, the finally keyword signifies that the statement inside the finally is executed no matter where there is an exception or not. So no matter where there is an exception or not, the finally block is executed. So for our example, so if I write finally here, so what we were seeing that if an exception occurs, my code did not, the print end statement was not executed, but I want to say that my code has finished whether an exception occurred or not. So we can use a finally block here, which is a very nice way to do certain things. So no matter what exception occurs or not, I'm saying end here. and here. So if I remove this from here, now whether an exception occurs or not, the finally block will be executed. So if I give 33 and 11, if I run this, start 33.0 end. So I have start C equals to A by B, that is 33 by 11, that is 3.0, 3.0 is being printed. Then the finally block is executed. I am printing end. What happens if an exception occurs? Now, if I write 0, previously when the exception was occurred, the end was not being printed when the end was here. So now what happens? Now if I run this, so my code has started. I'm trying to divide something by 0, which gives us an error, 0 division error. The error is being caught here, and this statement is being printed, cannot divide by 0. My program ends, my program ended like we saw before, but when we have a final block, the final block will be executed, so print end. So this is a very nice way when we want to execute some statements, whether exception occurs or not. Then moving on the final keyword, I hope this is understood. The same thing is shown in the slide. Else keyword. So the else keyword can also be used with try except statements. We saw the else keyword using when we saw conditional statements, when if else statements, when we saw if else statements. So the else keyword can also be used with exceptions, try except statements in a similar way. So if I write, suppose if there was no exception, so let me run this again. There were 33, 11. If I run this, it says start 3.0 end. Suppose I want to also print to the user that when there is no exception, I want to say to the user that no exception has occurred. Then we can use the else statement here with the try except statement. So if I write else, so if I write else here, so if there is an exception, so if there was an exception, I will write what the exception is, cannot divide by 0. So if there is no exception, then I just write no exception. I want to tell the user that there is no exception. So what happens here in a similar way like the if else block. So if there is an exception, this line is being executed. So if there is an exception, so if I 33 and 0, now there is a 0 division error, so there is an exception here. When an exception occurs, I say start cannot divide by 0 end. But when no exception occurs, I want to also say to the user that no exception has occurred. So when it was a equals to 33, b equals to 0, I'm printing start c equals to a by b. Sorry, c equals to a by b. So we cannot do this 33 by 0. This is not possible. This gives 0 division error. So the error is being caught here as an exception, and I'm printing cannot divide by 0. I have cannot divide by 0 here. Then the finally block is executed. I'm printing end. What happens if we write 11.0 here? So here there is no exception. Then the no exception statement is also being printed. So what is happening here? 33, a equals to 33, b equals to 11. I'm printing start, c equals to a by b. 33 by 11 is 3.0. So I'm printing 3.0 here. So I have 3.0 except exception. So there is no exception. So this, we will not go into this block. So because there is no exception, we will not print this. Since there is no exception, I will go to the else statement. Since the except statement is not being executed, I will go into the else statement and I will print no exception. So I'm printing no exception here. And finally, I'm printing end. The program has entered. So I hope this is understood. So this is a very simple and clear, like we saw in if else statements. So this is a similar way to tell the user whether an exception occurred or not. Moving on, this we will look at in our next lecture. So firstly, let me look at something else. So for example, a equals to say doc 33, we want to take an input from the user. Input, let's say I'm telling the user to please enter an integer. Let's say I'm asking the user to enter integer. We know that the input function takes the input as a string. So we would need to cast it into an integer. Now it's nice. So I'm taking an integer as input from the user. So the input is usually taken as a string, as we know. So we need to cast it to an integer. So if I run this, it's asking an integer from the user. If I enter 33, my code should run the same as before, start 3.0, no exception. Very nice. What if the user does not enter an integer? What if the user enters a string? As we know, the user is entering 33, so 33 is also being taken as input as a string but being cast to an integers. But for example, the user enters, let's say if I run this, the user enters bux. It is entering a string. The user is giving us a string. So if you want to cast this string into an integer, can we do that? No, bux cannot be cast into an integer. This should give us an error. So what kind of error? Let's look at it. So it gives us an error named value error. So name of the error is value error. The error is occurring as line number 1. We can identify it by the arrow given here, and it says value error. What does it say? The message: invalid literal for int with base 10 bux. So it is an invalid literal. I'm trying to cast it into an integer, but I'm giving a string. I'm giving a word here. So this word cannot be cast into a string. It is giving us a value error. So how can we handle this? As we know the problematic statements, we write the problematic statements inside the try block. We write the problematic statements inside the try block. So let's write this inside the try block. Now it should work fine. Now I have just put it inside the try block. So if I give normally a number, so let me give 33. If I give 33, I have start 3.0, no exception, end. Same as before, but now if you want to, sorry about that. Now if you want to enter, let's say I want to give bux as before. Now what happens? Now it says cannot divide by 0 end. What is happening here? Can you guess? So I'm entering bux here. It cannot be cast into an integer. So when we cannot do this, it gives us an error, as we saw before. It gives us an error. The name of the error is value error. So as we know, when there is an error in my code, the error is being caught in exception. The error is being caught in exception, in the except block. The error is being caught in the except block. So in our except block, the value error is being caught and it says cannot divide by 0. So we wrote this print statement because we wrote this print statement to identify the error in this line, c equals to a by b, where we were trying to divide by 0. So when we were trying to divide by 0, if an error occurred, we wanted to say that it cannot divide by 0. But here it gives us a different type of error. It gives us value error. So no matter what type of error, my catch exception block is catching that error. So it would be better for us. It would be very nice for us if you could handle exceptions differently. So for example, in this line gives us the error that can happen in this line is 0 division error. So when 0 division error occurs, we would like to print cannot divide by 0. Then if an error occurs in this line, so if my user gives us a string or word or sentence that cannot be cast into an integer, which is a value error. So when a value error occurs, we would like to print that please enter an integer, or we would like to we can say to the user that you have not entered an integer or something like that. So if you want to handle different type of errors differently, so if you want to handle 0 division errors, we want to print one message. If we are handling value errors, we want to print another message. So how can we handle different type of errors and using exceptions differently? That we will look at in our next lecture. Thank you so much for watching this. I hope this was understood. The concepts are a bit tricky, but with enough practice and if you keep trying, you will do well. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.